Welcome to the Note Nuggets podcast, where you can learn how to become the bank, build wealth, and accumulate streams of income perfect for your savings or IRAs. You'll hear from industry experts, seasoned veterans, and everyday investors. Our goal is to teach you how to invest in notes, one nugget of knowledge at a time. Here's your host, Kevin Galang.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Note Nuggets podcast, where you learn how to turn other people's debt into income for your savings or IRA. One of the advantages to being the bank is the security you're offered. As the bank, if the borrower ever defaults for whatever reason, you have recourse to take back the property. Even in the event of an unforeseen situation where the borrower stops paying, maybe they lose their job, maybe they get a divorce or have medical bills to pay, something along those lines, and they can no longer afford to pay their mortgage, which would mean they stop paying you as the bank, you are protected at the minimum because of the property's value. And in some foreclosure cases, you can even make money selling the property after you foreclose on the borrower. I used to think that a performing note turning into a non-performing note was my worst nightmare as a lender. But as I learned how to buy a note correctly with enough equity and how to handle a foreclosure through my legal team, it's become just another exit strategy to protect myself and my investors. Now that I'm more educated and more experienced, a foreclosure doesn't scare me. What really terrifies me is what our guest is about to describe to us. Now, I don't want to spoil it, but imagine purchasing a note with your hard-earned money, expecting to exit a non-performing note through legal action or even something more creative like a cash for keys, only to find out that your note didn't exist in the first place. Wouldn't that suck? All the advantages of being the lender are completely thrown out of the window, and you're left with absolutely nothing. That's why, even before you make a purchase of a note, due diligence is hugely important. And if you're a note investor and want some help with due diligence, or if you're stuck with your next move and don't know what to do with your note problem, book a time on my calendar. I'm always happy to help out. notenuggets.com/contact. Now, if you're on the fence about note investing, don't let this episode scare you away from this awesome niche. Are there risks in note investing? Absolutely. But every investment has its risks. Personally, I think saving your money as a form of retirement is the riskiest move of all. And the reason I say that is because you're guaranteed to lose money thanks to inflation. That's right. If you just build up a nest egg, don't ever invest it, and simply rely on quote unquote saving your money, you're going to lose money guaranteed. With note investing, there are ways to protect yourself even from the worst nightmares. There are multiple experts out there who can help you avoid some of the costliest mistakes they have made in the past as well. And if you're still not convinced in the power of note investing, keep listening to the podcast, and I promise you'll learn why many investors are so passionate about being the bank. And if you want, you can email me directly at kevin@notenuggets.com, and we can chat about notes in great detail and maybe come to an idea as to how they can be useful as part of your portfolio. But enough from me, and before we transition into this week's Note Nugget, let's learn about our guest. Accurate Group delivers technology-driven property appraisal, title data, analytics, and digital closing solutions to banks, credit unions, servicers, non-banks, and capital market firms nationwide. By combining modern process automation, accurate data, and innovative SaaS and mobile technologies, Accurate Group provides its clients with the best combination of speed, quality, regulatory compliance, and price. With Accurate Group, the real estate finance community and consumers benefit from market-leading solutions that enable modern digital frameworks, improve accuracy, lower cost, and improve compliance across all types of real estate loans, mortgage-related assets, and real estate portfolios. If you want to get in touch with the Accurate Group, all you have to do is head over to accurategroup.com. So what would be a worst case scenario, let's say from a lender's perspective, as I'm a note investor and the podcast is predicated and is about mortgage note investing, if they buy a note and they didn't get a title policy for that note in a mortgage and a defect comes up, what would be the worst case scenario?
Fraud is usually the thing that we have to worry about the most in our industry. Quite often we can do everything right and not detect fraud. Unfortunately, that's the reality I see I see instances of things that I think are fraud on a regular basis, but it's not as simple as determining whether or not you think someone signed a document. That's what a notary does. A document gets signed, a deed of trust, it's notarized. It's the notary's job to indicate that they know who this person is and they've verified their identification. In a lot of states, it requires them to check a photo ID like a driver's license. But in many instances, there are things that happen that are not detectable. People will file false releases on their property, pretending to be the bank, saying that the loan's paid off. That's one of the biggest and scariest things that goes on in our industry, and I've seen this many times and the claims are hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
Where someone will file a release on their property at the same time that they file a bogus or fake new mortgage on their property. So it looks to the casual observer that the person who owns the property took out a new loan, and the money from that new loan paid off the old loan. And then then they go and refinance again, but now they go to a bank and say, hey, you've got to pay off that new loan that was taken out. Well, that new loan really doesn't exist. It's a shell company, something of that nature, where now that bank is going to pay that money to that loan that really never existed in the first place. The lien that started in first position has been out there, and probably the owner's been making payments on it, so it doesn't raise any red flags. And because things have happened so recently, a credit report being 90 days out might not show that that first loan was paid and not paid, but you have proof that a new mortgage had been taken out. And so those things, like I said, can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars if we're not careful. And now they've sort of tightened up the whole trying to flip property over and one mortgage after another to avoid this, because it was for a while in the early 2000s a very deep pit to fall in.
So what I'm learning is the advantage really of a title report is to give you an additional piece to your due diligence, to make sure as best as you can to learn everything about, let's say, that note, that property, so that you can make a wise investment. And of course, it's not perfect. People do make mistakes. Things fall through the cracks. And that's where title policy kind of protects you in that, because it's always looking backwards, protecting you from things that happened in the past. Is that an effective summation of the title policy and title report?
Absolutely. And from an investment standpoint, I mean, obviously real estate and location of the property itself are all the key factors that you're looking at. But once again, that wellness check, what can't you see just by looking at the property?
Right.
What are the pitfalls? What are the dangers? And I think we're all in real estate. We understand that what you see on the surface isn't always what's below the surface.
Now that you know what my worst nightmare is, here's a pro tip for you. You don't have to rely on one expert's opinion only. You can always get a second opinion. You can always get a third opinion. You can get multiple title reports. Is it costly? Yes. But it's multiple layers of protection for you and your investors. To learn more from Accurate Group, head over to notenuggets.com/nightmare.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Note Nuggets podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get access to additional weekly value nuggets and get notified with episode updates. To subscribe, all you have to do is head over to subscribe.notenuggets.com. If you have any questions about this episode or note investing, book a time on Kevin's calendar at contact.notenuggets.com. We'll see you next week with another note nugget to add to your tool belt.